Leading today's discussion is Amy Tatum, Vice President and Technical Director of Starboard Consulting. Amy has over 25 years of experience as an engineer and technology consultant and has managed countless implementations of Maximo projects. You name it, she's implemented it. She's also served as our feature host and presenter for the Coffee Chat series. So save the date. Our next Maximo 8 Coffee Chat is coming up June 8th. Amy, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
All right. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate you getting us organized and putting this together. It looks like folks are still coming into the room. So welcome, everybody. I'm glad to have you with us today. As Alex said, my name is Amy Tatum. I'm with Starboard Consulting, and we're a gold business partner and implementer of Maximo. Have been doing that for a long time and have done a lot of integrations, quite a bit on the GIS and spatial side of things. And the BIM piece is kind of that 3D modeling and very interesting to us and helps a lot of our clients in the facilities space as well. So super excited to have Thomas Knowles with us here today. And Thomas comes to us from IBM. He's the product manager and architect on Maximo modernization. So Thomas, welcome. Thanks for joining us. You want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Amy. Nice to be here and get the opportunity to present to the folks here that are on the call. As Amy said, my name is Thomas Knowles. I'm a product manager for Maximo. And one of the areas that I'm currently responsible for is the BIM features and the Maximo Forge plugin that we're kind of going to be reviewing today. So I've been a Maximo product manager and on the design side since 2006. So I've been around for quite some time, worked in a lot of different areas of Maximo. Prior to that, I was in services and did implementations for several years before switching over to product management. So again, glad to be here, and I hope you enjoy what we're presenting.
Hey, thank you. So what we've got in store for you today, first we'll start with just a quick overview of Maximo's BIM tools, the plugin, and what is included with that, with the data imports and everything. Then Thomas is going to do an actual demonstration for us of how to utilize that within Maximo. We'll talk about some case studies where we've seen this successfully implemented for some clients and the value that they're gaining out of that. And then we'll talk about just how do we get started? What is the quick start to implement a BIM model within your Maximo, and then talk a little bit about the roadmap. So a lot of information to cover. This is a 1 hour long webinar, so hopefully we'll have plenty of time to get through all of the details that we've got to share with you, as well as answer any questions that come up in the chat. So as we go through, feel free to post your questions there. We'll try to answer them as we go along if they're relevant to the current topic, but we'll also then loop back around at the end and make sure we didn't miss any. So before we get started, I want to start with just kind of a quick overview of what exactly is BIM. It stands for Building Information Modeling. And as I was kind of looking up these definitions and thinking back, it made me remember a story from when I was an engineer graduate just out of college in my very first job, and was out on a job site that I was on the design team for, and listening to some of the construction guys bemoan the stupidity, I guess, of the engineers that were putting 6-inch conduits in 4-inch walls, and why they couldn't figure out that just wasn't ever going to work. Back then, we were in 2-dimensional paper drawings and drafting boards and things like that. So a BIM model wasn't really anything in our wheelhouse at the time, but certainly would have been helpful to prevent those types of situations. Just for the record, I was not the engineer that put the 6-inch conduit in the 4-inch wall. That was somebody else on the team. But this kind of thing just sort of made me remember that story. So anyway, what you see here is just a couple of definitions of what BIM is from various organizations out there. And there's a couple of things that kind of stand out in all of them. One, it's digital. So it is based on technology. Two, it's shared. And a lot of the value in BIM is just the collaboration and being able to share that information and have different people from different disciplines all work into that common model. So instead of having necessarily a set of mechanical drawings and a set of electrical drawings and things like that where there's no overlap, it brings it all together into one shared model. Information about the facility, obviously that's part of what makes it valuable is having that. And then it forms a basis for decision making. BIM models, we think of them as 3D models, but there's really 4 and 5D BIM, because when you start to look into that model, you're bringing in also the elements of cost and time, and even beyond that, other factors that might impact a building's design. So as you start looking at sustainability, operations, maintenance, things like that. So there's a lot that goes into a BIM model. It's BIM as a concept has been around since I think maybe the early 70s, but it's only been recently that it's really started to come into the forefront. Initially as a planning and engineering and design tool, then it kind of made its way into construction, and now we're seeing it pop up a lot more with the facilities operations and maintenance, and that's where this tie into Maximo becomes so valuable and so critical, because you're really taking that model that was maybe the birth of engineering and design and moving it into the long-term lifespan of the building over its life cycle with the operations and maintenance. So that's just a quick overview of kind of what BIM is, some definitions out there. I think before we get started, Alex, you were going to run a quick poll and just kind of see where our audience stands as far as their use of BIM currently today, right?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Great definitions, by the way. I was taking notes. I'm sure others were as well. So in the chat window, we would love to hear from you just where you're at. Is your organization currently using an adoption of BIM? If you're thinking about it and want to share some more information in the chat window, we'd love to hear that as well. So looks like about 25-30% yes. Great. I'm going to end the poll, but if you didn't get a chance to participate, again, please feel free to share in the chat box. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Alex. So Thomas, I'm going to turn this one over to you. Let's talk about why we even would use a BIM integration for Maximo.
Sure. Thank you. So, you know, some of the obvious things for using the BIM integration with Maximo are around time saving and reducing costs, right? And the way that you're able to do that is by improving your operational efficiencies. And so there are some studies that have been done and some research that have been done where that I recently saw that said, you know, when your maintenance workers are going to work out on, you know, to fix some critical asset that you're supporting in your operations, much of the time they spent is kind of gathering information from other areas, right? Mm-hmm. So if you can, instead of, and a lot of times they're going to different systems to gather that information, or they're going out to make a trip to, you know, that particular area before they even do any work out there, to either take measurements or understand the situation visually before they actually go actually can understand how they're going to do the repair that they're in that operational facility. So by bringing this visualization into your onto your work order, where your technician is out in the field doing the work, you can reduce that time, right? You can give them this visualization into the situation without them actually going over to the space. So just from a travel time perspective, and also gathering other information from, you know, the design and construction phase of when that facility was set up and laid out. Much of that information is captured during that phase, but it doesn't always make its way into Maximo. And in this case where we have this BIM integration, much of that information can be accessible to you directly from that model file that was originally built as part of the construction phase. So really, this is why you want to use this integration, is really to help you with your operational efficiencies, to try to save time and reduce costs and improve your information management, and really start that visualization. Move in a new age where you're traditionally in an asset management system, or like Maximo or any other system, you're looking at data, right, and kind of table format, rows and columns. You're searching for things based on a text string. Now, if you have a 3D model present of your facility, you can now, you know, walk through that, basically that model, and understand it visually. You can get to information faster without doing those, textual string searches that you would traditionally do, in your Maximo system. So those are some of the reasons for sure. Let me go ahead and move to our next slide. Some important things that you should know about, Maximo and the BIM integration that we have today. BIM, and Amy mentioned this earlier, I believe, this BIM integration that we have with Maximo, a portion of it is part of Core Maximo. So if you buy any Maximo Industry Solution or Maximo Enterprise Asset Management, the BIM features will be present in our offering. And those features are available starting with Fixpack 7606, which was released in October of 2016. So these features have been around for quite some time and available. Previously, when we first released them, there was an additional download that you had to do to install those features into your 760 environment. But now with, I believe with 7606, they're just present in your Maximo installation when you install that version of Maximo. One of the reasons that we got interested with these features and functionality back, way back in 2014, 2015 is because we saw more and more projects across industries, not just in, a lot of them are in facilities and building, different facilities like hospitals and airports and schools and government buildings. But there's a lot of projects across industries that are requiring you to use these building information modeling principles, right, or process, right? Some of the ISO standards that Amy mentioned in the first slide are becoming more mandatory and less optional, right? So because of that, we started to see more and more of our customers pick up these practices, and we wanted to provide them with these features and our Maximo offering. So also one quick thing, but BIM is, I mentioned construction several times, right? It's part of the construction process, but it also covers those critical assets that which you manage in your Maximo implementation as part of your operation. So all those critical assets that are part of your facility that are critical to making sure it operates are covered as well in this process. I mentioned how BIM is a basis for data visualization, and then also Maximo BIM is kind of a powerful way to see new assets and locations into your Maximo implementation out of the box, because we support a COBie, and you can take the information that's in your COBie file and upload that straight into Maximo, establishing your set of assets and locations. So those are some things that you should take away definitely from this conversation, or to think about as we move forward. So let me move over to our next slide.
So COBie sounds like it should be a fish. What is that exactly?
Or a beef, right? Or a beef.
Yeah, there you go. COBie beef. We can do that too.
Yeah. So COBie actually is, COBie stands for Construction Operation Building Information Exchange. And it's a standard that was put forth by the Building Smart Alliance, which is an international organization that develops and promotes different standards for these two different industries, constructions and operations. So that COBie standard has been around for, I want to say,
quite a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. And I think the latest format was around the same time that we added these BIM features into Maximo, or not the latest format, but the most, and the 2.4 format, I think, was in maybe 2007, and then beyond that were additional formats of COBie. But COBie is, think of it as almost like a PDF of information, right, that you can use to hand off from this construction phase of your project into the operational phase, where traditionally, before you had electronic or digital records, you would have to, that when they finished those construction projects, they would give the operation guys just a pallet or pallets, right? Several pallets of blueprints and user manuals and, all kinds of information that was hard copy, or and even moving into the newer age, even digital copies, but it's still pallets of, discs and things with information that wasn't really connecting the two processes together, construction to operation process. So in that exchange, a lot of information was lost, right? So this COBE format and the Building Smart Alliance, they're working to try to make sure that the exchange of that information between those two processes captures what's needed between those two entities throughout the life cycle of, your facility or construction project in general. So that's what COBE is, and I'll show you an example of that when we get into the demonstration, and it'll become a little more clear. I'll talk a little bit more about it in upcoming slides and also the demonstration. So a little bit more detail to dive into about our BIM integration in Maximo. What you'll actually see, and if it's something that you haven't seen in your if you are an existing Maximo customer, what you'll see when you have this version installed and you have these applications exposed from a security perspective, they're already all security controlled. But what you'll see is two kind of you'll see a building information modeling sub menu in your left navigation bar, and then you'll see several applications that are related to BIM and this BIM features and BIM processes and Maximo. One of those applications is BIM projects, and really BIM projects is the area in Maximo. It's an application you open up, and it's the area in Maximo where you would create a session to ingest that COBE information as it's handed off to you. Now that information could be handed off at the end of the project, but the end of the construction project when they commission the building, you obviously probably don't want to wait that long. You want to start to gather that information as this process is going forward. So as you reach certain milestones in the construction phase, as part of those milestones, you want to capture some of the information that's been built, that's building out in your construction project, and you can capture that information, the elements, the assets that are going to be managed and maintained at Maximo in this COBE file format. And you use this BIM project area to iteratively, ingest or consume that COBE information into Maximo. And the result of that is it's going to build out a set of Maximo assets and a set of Maximo hierarchy, location hierarchy, I should say, that are tied to those assets that are representative of that 3D model that was and the facility that was delivered from a construction perspective. And I'll get into a little bit more about the BIM. I'll show you the BIM project application and how that works. But so that's one of the applications you get. And then also you have an application that's called Manage BIM Viewer. And within this application, this is where you would actually use this application to upload your model files. So the model file is actually the 3D file, right? That is produced in the 3D tool. And that's what we actually expose, as you can see kind of in the lower right-hand corner of this slide. That bottom screen is the 3D viewer, which will show you the model in 3D in Maximo. So we have in Maximo what we call the BIM integration framework. It's kind of the underlying code that allows you to expose different viewers in Maximo. And we also offer free, right? We deliver this as open source on GitHub, or we can also give you a compile code that we offer in our IBM community, but it's completely free. It's the Maximo Forge plugin, and this will allow you to view your model file using the Autodesk Forge viewer. That's a separate download and has to be installed, but it is free, open source, available to you, and to use as a reference as you move forward with these BIM features in Maximo. So let me move to the next slide. Okay. Just to kind of give you kind of a quick overview of how that BIM integration works. I talked about it a little bit, but to get into a little more detail, I've kind of got this life cycle process, I guess, maybe from left to right, which it starts in a 3D design tool. And in the case here, I'm showing Autodesk Revit, right? So you take like a 3D design tool, and this is what you would use to build out, right, a 3D design of your facility or whatever whatever it is you're going to manage from an operations perspective in Maximo. In this case, we're using Autodesk Revit, but there are other tools like Bentley, ArchiCAD, other design tools that can be used as you design those that 3D model. And each of those elements that's put within the model has a specific set of properties, right? Values. How big is this particular element, right? What's the width? What's the height? Tons of different properties are captured on that particular element as you build out the 3D file. And how those elements are interconnected is also captured as properties in the 3D file. That 3D tool, in our case, again, Autodesk Revit, has a plugin. It's called the BIM Interoperability Tools that will allow you to export those properties from the model file into a COBie format, right? This is how the COBie file is actually produced from the 3D design. Once that file is exported to COBie, you can then take that file, open up your Maximo, the BIM projects area that I talked about before, and you can actually import that information into Maximo. The result of that is you get a list of assets and locations, other data as well. The reference data is also loaded, like item master and companies, contacts, job plans. All those things that support asset and location can also be loaded through COBie, depending on how much data you have in that COBie file. But the main bulk of what you're loading is that set of assets and location records. So once you have that loaded, it'll also load a reference to that element in the model file itself. And then you can use our other Manage BIM Viewer application to load the actual 3D model file. And then what happens is if you select that record in Maximo, say an asset record, and you open the 3D tab, which is new to these BIM features, then it will highlight, it'll open the model file from the Forge Cloud, and it'll highlight in context that particular asset that Maximo record is selected on, right? Which kind of gives you this, this screen to the right. So I'm going to take you through it and a demonstration and show you how it works, and point out some more specific things. So
before we jump into
that's overall high level how the integration works.
So Thomas, before we jump into the demo, there's a couple questions that have popped up in the chat here that we might want to go ahead and address. One of them, as that asset and location hierarchy gets created, does it support a one-to-one relationship between the locations and assets? So is it creating that lowest level functional or operating location that ties one-to-one? Okay.
Yeah, it creates the operating location. It'll create an operating location. This is an optional. So when you do the upload from COBie, there are a set of settings, properties or settings that can be, there's lots of them, lots of switches that you can enable or disable.
Yeah.
By default, one of the switches that is enabled is to create an operating location for that particular asset that gets loaded, right?
Sure. So the other question I had then, looking at these and even just the name BIM and the fact that it's a building information model kind of implies that it really is only valuable if you start with a new building and a new design, and you're getting all of this rich data from your engineering and construction process. So what about the folks who have facilities that have been around for a while and maybe they don't have a BIM model in existence? Or what if their assets and locations already exist in Maximo because they were created through some other process previously? Can we add the BIM data after the fact to an existing location?
Okay, there's a couple things. One is you're
that's a big question, I know.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's a great question. So there are a couple things. One is if there's existing data in Maximo that wasn't previously loaded that you want to hook now into a model that you have, a 3D model file that you have, you can make that connection. What you would have to do is you wouldn't load that. So every asset and location record that's loaded into Maximo through the BIM import, there's a model ID that references the element in the model file. It's like a hook into the model file. So that gets loaded through the COBie import. But if you have existing set of assets that weren't loaded through COBie, they wouldn't have that hook, right, or reference to the model file.
Right.
So what you can do is you can actually use the integration capability that's currently available in Maximo. The integration framework to actually compile. Well, you outside of that, you would compile a list of assets and the corresponding model ID from the model source, and then you would update those assets. And then once you make that update and reference the model file, it will then open in context, right? That again, that's the hook. So
sure.
you can do that, and we've had customers that have made that connection. As they move forward with this features in Maximo. The other thing is if you don't have a 3D model and say, you don't want to hire a design firm, right, to come in and create a 3D model for you. What's interesting these days is technology is getting so good. I've been recently talking to some other customers, and they've actually had third parties come in and actually scan their facility with either a Matterport or a LiDAR scanner, and that will actually capture it'll do a scan of your facility, and it actually records the geometry of the building using lasers and cameras, and they can actually take that scan and use it to actually produce a model in very quick, like in a day, 2 days, they can have a model from that particular scan. And technology is just evolving so quick in this area. It's very interesting. If you get a chance after this, go out to Google and search for, I don't want to plug the Apple, but if you Google LiDAR scanning with an iPhone 12, it now has a LiDAR scanner on it, and there's some really interesting videos where you can see people in 5 minutes, they'll scan their apartment, and they have a 3D model of their apartment just using the scanner on their particular phone. So it's getting easier and easier to get the, it's crazy. It's getting easier and easier to get a hold of this information. So there are some options that are out there and available.
Interesting. All right, so let's jump into the demo and see what we've got.
Okay, let me go to share my screen. Okay, and just you'll have to tell me if the screen is okay. I can't see now that I'm sharing anymore. Is it look okay? I'm at my Maximo login screen.
Yep, it looks good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to take you through kind of a quick demonstration, just to give you kind of a feel for how this particular these features work in Maximo today, right? So I'm just using a local sales VM, and I use this for development and to do demos and those types of things. So not any high-powered server. It's just my laptop. I'm going to log in to Maximo.
And that looks like a 761 environment, right?
Yeah, this is a 7612.
Okay.
So I think it's the late, maybe not the latest hot fix, but it's the latest version of Maximo we have.
So shameless plug, those of you that haven't upgraded yet, make sure
Yeah,
you get that happening.
for sure.
We can help.
Okay. So I've got, I've got a start center that's got some BIM specific applications already preloaded. I mean, in portlets on the start center with some specific BIM information. But in general, I mentioned that this in the left nav bar, you will see the building information module, and then you will see these different applications that are related to the BIM features. So to start things out, I'm just going to go to that BIM projects application. And I'm going to show you what you would do in this particular project application. So I've, for the sake of timing, right, I've preloaded some information in my demo environment. So I'm not going to do a full load here, but I'm going to talk you through what was previously done and do what we call a validation of data. So
can you zoom in a little bit on that one? I'm not sure if it's just my screen or others, but it might be a little bit small.
Yeah, let me see if I can make this bigger. Is that better? Or
yeah,
more?
That's better. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so I opened the first project record, and basically this project record, the demo data that I'm using is it's called IBM ThinkSpace. It's an executive briefing center we have in Dublin, Ireland. It's an IBM location. I mean, this is what we have for demo data because it's our location. So it's been around for quite some time. So in this BIM project, right, if I was going to load information into Maximo, just to set the scenario for you. So say there's a new construction project at this ThinkSpace, and we're adding a wing onto that building with several levels. So from a Maximo perspective, I know that I'm going to manage that location in the future. So as the construction project is happening, and they have certain information built out, maybe it's electrical, right? When they hit a certain milestone, they have all the electrical in, or they have all the plumbing in, or they have all the mechanical in. Those are kind of the typical MEP in the construction industry is what they call it. Those are kind of the typical milestones, right? So as they reach each of those milestones and those things get completed, it might be a good spot for you to kind of take that data from the model in the COBie format and then upload it into Maximo. So the way you would do that is, you would get your COBie file, and then you would go to this BIM projects area, and you would create a project session. Now you can see here I've got 14 different sessions, right? That I've already, because I've done this many times. but this is an iterative process, and you would probably, as a real implementation, you would also have multiple project sessions like this because it's completely iterative, right? What I would do is I basically create my project, and I say what parent location I'm starting at, basically, right? If there's not one in Maximo already, then I might create that parent location to get us started. In this case, I've got this Dublin, BC for ThinkSpace, and I would create a new session, right? And when I click on my create new session, there are several things I can do. One, I can import, right? This is going to import that COBie data, or I can export it, or I can update it, or I can validate it. In this case, I'm going to validate it, right? Just because I've already imported it. So I just want to give you a feel of, the steps that you would go through to get the data in. The validate steps are the exact same as the import. It just doesn't import the data. It basically validate just does a check of the data to make sure that, what you're loading is going to load properly in Maximo before you do the import.
It's kind of like the preview mode on the integration framework.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. Yep. So I'm going to click on validate, then click OK. I can put in a description. And I'm going to select my COBie file. I'm just going to select it here. Okay. And before I do that, let me flip over to Excel and show you what a COBie file looks like, right? So we talked about this in the beginning couple slides. This is the format that would be exported from the 3D tool. And you can see there's a first sheet with instructions, but basically it takes that hierarchical data from the 3D model and it kind of flattens it out into these different tabs, right? There's a contact tab, right? That's reference data. Basically, that's going to be referenced on them from the type and different areas. There's facility. There's a facilities tab, which is the top level, right? There's a floors tab. So in this case, I've got the executive briefing center, and then I got 3 floors: a basement, a level 2, and a roof. And then in each of those floors, right, I have spaces. These are the different spaces, just these 200 numbers. I could have zones. In this file, I don't have zones. I have types. These types equate to items, or that would be in your item master in Maximo, right? So this is kind of those reference items that are going to be referenced when you load your assets. There are components. These components are what turns out to be your assets in Maximo. There are systems. Systems is the same kind of concept that we have system concept in Maximo, right? It's a network of locations or assets that are connected together to achieve some common goal. It's on and on, but those are the major kind of areas within the COBie file. And you can see how it's it's all color coded and referenced. This data is referenced from each of the sheets. Like, for example, if I go to the space tab, right, you can see I only have those 2 floors that it can be referenced. So this, it takes that hierarchical model in the 3D file and flattens it out so that we can consume these records. You can also see that each of these records, right, like from a component perspective, has a unique identifier, right? That's this unique identifier from the Revit system itself. This is the Revit GUID. Okay, so back to Maximo. I'm gonna take my COBie file, and I'm going to select that file, and then I have several options. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a bunch of different switches, right? That you can. Yeah. So here you have some different options. I'm not going to go over all these. These actually, if you look over here on the right, you can set these for every session you start. There's a set of default settings, but every session that you load can have, you can make tweaks to those particular settings, right? So there's different things you can turn off and on as you import that data, right? You can do some filtering to filter data out and only load certain aspects. Under this, there's a lot of settings under this advanced tab. One of those things is, let's see, skip systems with no, there's a lot of control that you can have. If you want to convert your GUIDs for some reason, you're trying to match it up for another set of data, you can do that GUID conversion with these switches. From a record creation perspective, we talked about creating an operating location for each asset. That's this checkbox here. If you wanted to create item master records for every type in the COBie field, you would check this here, right? So there's lots of different behaviors that can be controlled and options that can be controlled from these settings as you import the things. How is the ID generated for each of those records in Maximo? These types of things can all be configured. Once I have the settings that I want, then I'm going to click over to this log records, and you can see, just like when we do, if you're familiar with Maximo on the administration side, we have database configuration, and we have the turn admin mode off and turn it on, and this is kind of a similar dialogue where I'm going to log, once I validate these records, it's going to start producing a log in here. And this is going to show me the percentage of complete and errors and warnings. So I'm going to go ahead and click validate, right? And it's going to start validating my file. Let me see if I can drag this open. When I refresh, oh, it already went through the entire file. So it was 100% complete. There were 32 errors, and all those errors are kind of logged here in this particular window. and this information is saved with that BIM project session, so I can always go back to it and look at it, right? I get a lot of warnings in this because I did a validate, and much of this information is already preloaded. It's going to give me, warning message like this is a duplicate, right? So it would pre-warn me those types of things before I actually loaded the data. Again, so you can, from a preview perspective, you can look at what you're going to load before you actually load it. So that's how you would kind of load or import that COBie information. You see it created the new record here. It gives you information about what I loaded, the number of errors. If I want to go back and look at the settings that I had it on, I can always click back in here, look at my log, right? Look at all the settings that I previously had. All that becomes captured read-only as part of the session. So once that is loaded, the result of that, right, is if I go over to something like my locations application, and I look for, my locations, what happens is it loaded all those locations that were in the COBie file. So it loaded 238 new locations. Obviously, I preloaded these, but this is what happens if you were to actually do the import, right? You would get this set of imported records, right? You would get 238 locations, and then you would also get assets, for example. If I go over to my assets, this is all the component records, right, from that COBie file. If you look, these descriptions, if I go back and look at my COBie file, right, in the components tab, these are the same names that were there, right? M Global Valve, Coffee Dot, chairs. These are the things that were loaded in from COBie.
So a lot of our clients will have extra fields that they've added into the location and asset records. Would those get added to the COBie model file? Was that part of what was on the mapping tab back in the projects application? Or do we have opportunities to extend this with an automation script or something to set additional values?
You could, there's several things you can do. We do offer, you can load additional attributes through the COBie file. If those are attributes that are being picked up right from the model.
Right.
So if they are attributes being picked up from the model, then they can actually be, they can easily be added as part of the COBie data. There's actually, if I look in here, there's an attributes tab, right? And this shows you the attributes, the extra attributes that came from the 3D model. Sure. And those actually get added as spec attributes in Maximo. So there's also a way that you can do some mapping as well to existing columns if that's something that's not in the spec attribute, that's just on the asset record. There are kind of several ways to do it. You could do it through that mapping process, and that might be a good topic for a follow-up discussion because it could probably get pretty detailed.
Sure.
So it is possible, but there's different ways to do it. So once you have this information loaded, asset and location records, you can then go to your Manage BIM viewer, and you actually upload the model file, right? So this is the model file that was part of the 3D model that was produced by the 3D design tool, right? So this is a .rvt file of Executive Briefing Center. And again, the unique ID is the GUID attribute. That's what hooks in, right, this data that was loaded from COBie and the model elements within the model file. So the result of that, once you get that loaded, is if I go back over to my locations application, and I look for a specific, this is my favorite one for some reason to click on, but if I click on this storage tank for my location, you'll see that I get this 3D tab now in Maximo. If I click on that 3D tab, let me move this over some. Well, it's loading now. Yeah, so it's rendering and pulling down the model file, and you can see it highlighted in context. Let me change the the view here. It highlighted in context that storage tank, right, within the viewer window itself. I can make this full screen if I wanted to, right? So, and you know, once I'm in the viewer window, right, there's certain things I can do. I can spin and rotate the model. I can drag it over, right? Let me pan again, or let me orbit some more. I can look underneath it, look all around it, right? And these are just controls that are part of the viewer, the Forge Viewer framework. But there's a lot of cool controls that give you a lot of information about Maximo. Let me move this thing. Okay. Let me go back. See if I can move this. Okay. This little the thing from our meeting was over my toolbar here in the viewer.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's lots of different things you can do in here, right? You can orbit, pan. I could actually, if I wanted to, I could walk in first person, right? Do the model. I can click here, right? Okay. I can teleport basically here, right? And I could walk right through the model if I wanted to. I could also let me get out of first person and go back home. There's lots of things I can do if I wanted to take a measurement, let's say, of this. Let me get it better. If I wanted to take a measurement of, say, this pipe run, like this run of pipe, right? That's part of the model. If I want to take a measurement of that, I can use the measuring tool. That's part of the BIM viewer, right? And it'll tell me how long that pipe run is, right? 16 feet.
So it's going to tell me how much pipe I need to take with me to the job if I've got to replace that, or how tall of a ladder I need to bring, or something like that. So
yeah, exactly.
All good stuff.
Yeah.
We're down to about 10 minutes left, so I don't know how much more I know. I mean, we both could probably sit and play around and walk through this stuff all day long. So
yeah, let me do a couple things. So you know, you've got all these BIM viewer window controls where you can do things like, you know, pan and measure and all that. But we also have our own Maximo controls, right? So if I wanted to, say, click on this boiler and create a work order, I could create a work order right here from the viewer itself, right? Or if I wanted to look at, you know, how these things were connected, right? Say from, you know, who are the members in this particular system? I could click on that and it would show me the members of the system, components of the system, sorry, for domestic hot water, right? So it shows me all these things participate in that particular system, these sinks, this valve, this water tank. So there's lots of cool stuff and lots of cool information you can get. If I wanted to look at some of the model information, right, I can view that here under the model properties information for that particular item. So this 3D view is part of the location, asset, and the work order application. And it gives you, you know, all these controls from those, you know, Maximo areas. So it's really cool. Let me stop demoing real quick and we'll go back to the slides because I know there's a few things we wanted to cover before we wrap up. Go back to the slides here.
Are they coming up for you?
No.
Get back to where we left off.
Okay. You're going to control them for me?
I'm trying.
Okay, thank you.
Here we go.
Yeah, so I'll just spend just a couple of minutes here. I do have in the slides, I think we're going to share these slides later. I do have a couple of case studies where, they're using Maximo and an integration to a BIM viewer. The key thing here is, I won't go through just in the sake of time, but there are three components, and they've presented many times at user groups, and there's information that's available out online about each of these particular case studies. The first one is University of California, San Francisco, and they use this for, when they developed when they had a new hospital construction. They use this integration with Maximo and the Autodesk Forge viewer to help them in their operational processes. And I have a link at the bottom. Those highlighted, underlined links at the bottom will take you to the case study and actually some online videos of some other presentations that they've shared in the past. On the right, far right, is a similar study. That's with Maine General Hospital, where they're using Maximo. They don't use the Autodesk Forge viewer, but they use our underlying integration, BIM integration capabilities to enable the UBIM viewer, which is another viewer technology that's out in the marketplace. So two things that you can go look at in more detail. There you go to the next slide.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, this is more on the UCSF case. I'll leave that one for today. But this kind of describes, a scenario that they'll talk you. If you go out and look at the use case, they'll talk you through this actual scenario, and how they use this technology to help with some operational issues that they had in the cafeteria on one Sunday night.
Yeah.
So
it's a great scenario and a great use case of the value of this process. And I think this middle one here with Sandia is also another one of, you just look at the bottom line savings. If you can take just an hour or two off of your planning effort on every work order, what does that multiply out to?
Yeah,
over the course of a year. So really huge stuff. Looking at these, so again, I know we've got some clients on the line that aren't necessarily facilities, they're not necessarily building management. So we've got a couple of scenarios here, I think, that are not buildings. So they're kind of non-traditional uses of BIM that we wanted to highlight.
Yeah. There's a couple things I'll mention, and this is, I borrowed this slide from our IBM Digital Twin folks and services, but they have an implementation or Maximo for a telecommunication company, and they used the BIM integration that I showed you. You can see in that right column, right, is the same viewer window that I showed, but what they're highlighting there is not, building, right, with walls, and it's actually a cell tower, a telco tower. So that can be modeled in a 3D tool, just like a facility can be. And that information, we have lots of customers from a Maximo perspective in those types of industries.
Sure.
Telecommunication, electrical. You could have a power station in here. Also, we released earlier this year, I believe, Maximo for civil infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And Maximo for civil infrastructure uses this same BIM features and technology to show and display a visual of things like bridge infrastructure or railroad infrastructure, roads, tunnels, bridges. Those types of things can also be exposed from a model perspective, and the information can be imported the same way that I described in the previous slides. So lots of opportunity in other areas besides just a facility construction type scenario.
Yeah, really good stuff. I know we were going to go through a quick start, but we've also got a couple of questions that have come in. One of them is the roadmap, and I don't remember if we had a roadmap to show or if you want to talk to that real quick.
I didn't have a road. I took that chart out and we left it.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, when I noticed that when he pulled it up. So, I mean, I'm fine with sharing a roadmap slide. I could put it back in, but we do have a roadmap. We are looking at. There's several things that we're looking at, right, to enhance the capabilities with the current viewer technology that we have today, and that whole Kobe import process to make it a little more smoother and user friendly,
Sure.
and simpler. So there's lots of it's feature rich, but being feature rich sometimes can be overwhelming or complicated, right?
It can be.
We're trying to make it easier, based on what we have today. That's our major focus for upcoming releases. So
if you're not familiar with that Kobe model, your first run at an import can be pretty humbling experience. I'll say that.
Yeah, it can be. And this is one of the reasons I put together this quick start guide. And I know we don't have the time to go through it today, but I encourage you to, have a look at the slides. I think we're going to share these, right? So I would encourage you to go through the slides. Basically, there's a lot of information on Kobe and setting up and configuration, and managing the Forge viewer. There's lots of information that's available out today. There are several guides that have lots of information, but those quick start slides that I've included are kind of like a cookbook or a recipe for, how can you do this? How can you get to a point where like that I was today when I demoed it, right?
Right.
And once you have a working model and you can kind of click through an example, especially to our Maximo people, which I know there's a lot on the phone today, it'll click for them, right? And they'll know how to apply that to their own implementation. So that's the point or purpose for that quick start guide. I encourage you to go through it, and it should quickly take you through in several steps, but it'll quickly take you through how to get this set up and running in your own environment. So.
Yep, good stuff. Lots of good documentation out there as well. So definitely the materials that are online, the user communities to support it, the Maximo business partners and IBM folks are all available. So one more question out here. Does the Forge plugin work with multi-tenancy?
It does not today.
I didn't think so, yeah.
It does not. No, that's a good question. But no, that's something that we would look at from a roadmap perspective, but it doesn't today, yeah.
And I think it's on the roadmap for Mass 8 as well. That's not part of the original 8.0 release, which is today. This is a big day for Maximo, right?
Yeah, I mean, we did some preliminary testing, and it will work, but we didn't have the opportunity to fully test it out. So, once we do our full testing in the next couple of weeks, then we'll actually probably produce an 8.1 version of that plugin. All the BIM and Kobe part is part of Maximo, and that all works today, right? Because it's just part of core Maximo. But that additional download for the plugin, the Forge plugin that gives you the viewer, that hasn't been completely 100% tested out on the new version yet. Okay.
It's one of those things that probably works, but it's not tested yet. Therefore, it's not quite supported.
Exactly. I know. Actually, I know it works, but it's we haven't 100% tested it yet. So
sure. Yeah. There you go. All right. Well, cool. Well, Thomas, thanks so much for your time today. This was really great, very informative. Lots of good information. And again, to those of you that were on the webinar and didn't get to see everything, we will be publishing this and making the information available. So, Alex, anything to say as we wrap up our hour?
No, thank you so much. I think we could have gone another hour looking at quick start guides and more demos and case studies. So we appreciate it. Again, we will send out the information. For those of you that aren't already registered, be sure to join us on June 8th for our 30-minute coffee chat series. This is going to be diving deep into the technical aspects of Maximo 8. Speaking of the date.
Good stuff.
Amy, Thomas, thank you. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.